I met Adrian 3 weeks after moving into the dorms, and my first impression of him was that he talked too much. Not in an annoying way, exactly. More like he physically couldn't let silence exist for longer than 5 seconds. The first thing he ever said to me was, "You look like the kind of guy who alphabetizes his notes." I looked up from unpacking my desk lamp. "What?" He leaned against our doorway with his arms crossed, grinning like he already knew me. "You just have that vibe." "I don't alphabetize my notes. Color code them. Sometimes. That counts." He smiled like he'd won something. That was Adrian, confident without trying too hard. Dark curls that were always messy no matter what he did. Hoodies stolen from friends. A voice that sounded warm even when he was teasing someone. The kind of guy everybody in the dorm seemed to know within 48 hours. Meanwhile, I'd been there nearly a month and still avoided the communal kitchen during busy hours because I hated awkward small talk. Adrian lived 2 doors down from me with 3 other guys on our floor. Technically, he wasn't even my roommate. But somehow he became part of my routine almost immediately. At first it was harmless. He'd stop by while I studied and complain about professors. Or he'd knock on my door asking if I had charger cables, snacks, painkillers, paper clips, random things he probably didn't actually need. "You're weirdly prepared for life," he told me once while stealing instant noodles from my shelf. "You're weirdly incapable of planning ahead." "Exactly," he said. "That's why we balance each other out." And for a while, that's all it was. Just friendship. At least that's what I told myself. The first late-night conversation happened by accident. Around midnight, someone knocked softly on my door while I was half asleep over a sociology reading. I opened it expecting noise complaints or drunk freshmen. Instead, Adrian stood there in gray sweatpants and a sweatshirt, holding 2 vending machine coffees. "You awake?" "Barely." "Perfect," he said. "I need company." I should have said no. I had an 8 a.m. class the next morning. Instead, I stepped aside. He walked in like he belonged there already, dropping onto the floor beside my bed while I sat at my desk. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing." He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." "That's your emergency?" "You wound me, Caleb." I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. That night we talked until nearly 3 in the morning. About hometowns, families, the weird pressure of pretending you know what you're doing with your life at 21. Adrian told stories dramatically, using his hands so much he nearly knocked over both coffees twice. "You know what your problem is?" he asked eventually. "I'm sure you're about to tell me. You think too much before you say anything. And you don't think at all." "Exactly," he said proudly. By the time he left, my room smelled like cheap coffee and his cologne. The next night, he came back, this time without coffee. "Can I hide in here?" he asked. "From what?" "My roommates are arguing about cryptocurrency again." "That's fair." He grinned and flopped onto my beanbag chair like it was part of his nightly routine. And somehow, it became one. Every night around midnight, Adrian would appear at my door. Sometimes he knocked. Sometimes he just cracked it open and whispered, "You decent?" Unfortunately, I'd answer. Then he'd come in, always with some excuse. Couldn't sleep. Too loud in his room. Needed help studying. Wanted to vent. Wanted to just talk. That phrase became his favorite. "I'm not interrupting, right?" he asked one night. "You literally interrupt me every night." "Yeah, but I'm charming enough that you allow it." He wasn't wrong. The thing was, I started waiting for him. That became the dangerous part. Around 11:30 every night, I'd stop focusing on whatever assignment I was pretending to do and start listening for footsteps in the hallway. For his knock. For his voice. It was stupid how quickly someone could become part of your day. Or night. One evening he didn't come. I told myself it didn't matter. Then midnight passed. Then 1 a.m. I got irrationally annoyed about it. At 1:30, there was finally a soft knock. I opened the door too fast. Adrian blinked at me. "Wow, you were ready. I wasn't waiting for you." "Sure." He looked exhausted that night. Quieter than usual. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged and sat on the edge of my bed instead of the floor this time. "My ex texted me." I paused. Adrian almost never talked seriously about relationships. Usually, everything became a joke before it could turn real. "What happened?" "She said she misses me." He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Which is annoying because now I'm thinking about stuff I don't want to think about. I sat beside him carefully. "You miss her?" "I miss being important to someone," he admitted. Something tightened in my chest at that. The room suddenly felt too small. Adrian leaned back on his hands, staring at the ceiling. "You ever feel lonely around people?" he asked quietly. All the time. He turned his head toward me then, and for a second the energy shifted into something unfamiliar. Not joking, not casual, just real. You get me, he murmured. My pulse jumped hard enough that I hated myself for it, because I knew exactly when things started changing for me. It was moments like that, small ones, the kind that sneak up on you before you realize you're in trouble. By mid-October, Adrian basically lived in my room. Not officially. He still slept in his own room down the hall, still kept his clothes there, still claimed he only stopped by for a few minutes. But somehow those few minutes always turned into hours. Every night, like clockwork. Around midnight, I'd hear the familiar knock. Then his voice. You awake? And no matter how tired I was, I always answered. One night, he came in carrying an entire microwave pizza balanced on notebook paper. I bring offerings, he announced. That looks medically unsafe. Probably, he agreed. Move over. I was sitting cross-legged on my bed reviewing lecture slides. Adrian kicked off his shoes and climbed beside me without hesitation, close enough that our shoulders bumped. Neither of us moved away. That had started happening more lately. Little touches, accidental at first, then less accidental. His knee pressing against mine while we watched videos on my laptop. His arm brushing mine when he reached for something. His head falling briefly onto my shoulder when he got tired. None of it should have meant anything. Except it did. At least to me. The problem was Adrian treated affection casually with everyone. Hugs, leaning against people, throwing arms over shoulders. He existed physically in the world in a way I never had. So every time my brain tried to turn something into a sign, I shut it down immediately. You're reading into it. He's just comfortable around you. Don't ruin this. Still, it was getting harder to ignore certain things. Like the way Adrian only came to my room now, not anyone else's. Or how he'd text me from 10 feet away in class. You alive? And somehow that tiny message would improve my entire day. One Thursday night, rain hammered against the dorm windows while Adrian lay upside down across my bed scrolling through his phone. You know what's weird? He said suddenly. Everything about you. Rude. He threw a pillow at me. No, seriously. We spend an unhealthy amount of time together. You're the one who keeps showing up. Yeah, but you keep letting me. I looked up from my laptop. He was staring at me now instead of his phone. The air shifted again. That same dangerous stillness that kept happening lately. Finally, I shrugged. I like talking to you. Adrian's expression softened instantly. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. God. It was unfair how sincere he sounded sometimes. To recover, I grabbed the remote and tossed it at him. Pick something to watch before you get emotional. He laughed, tension broken, but not completely. Later that night, sometime around 2 in the morning, Adrian fell asleep in my room for the first time. Not intentionally. One second, he was talking about some story from high school, words getting slower and softer. The next, his eyes closed mid-sentence. You seriously just powered down, I muttered. He made a tired noise without opening his eyes. I should have woken him up. Instead, I sat there for a long moment just looking at him. At how relaxed he seemed here. Safe. Eventually, I grabbed the blanket from the foot of my bed and draped it over him carefully. His eyes opened slightly. You're nice, he mumbled sleepily. You're delirious. Nah, his mouth twitched into a smile. You take care of me. The words hit harder than they should have. I turned off the lamp before he could see my face. After that, sleeping in my room started happening more often. Always accidentally. Sometimes he'd say he was too tired to walk back down the hall. Sometimes he'd pass out during movies. Once he claimed his roommates were conducting psychological warfare with loud music and refused to go back. You know there are actual study lounges open all night, right? I told him. Yeah, he said, climbing into the beanbag chair anyway. But your room's better. The dangerous thing about routines is how quickly they stop feeling unusual. By November, Adrian being in my room at 2 a.m. felt more normal than him not being there. Other people noticed too. One afternoon in the dining hall, one of Adrian's friends smirked when Adrian sat beside me. You two dating yet or what? I nearly choked on my drink. Adrian laughed immediately. Too quickly. Caleb would get sick of me in 24 hours. True. I muttered, staring at my tray. Everyone laughed. Conversation moved on. But my chest stayed tight the rest of lunch. Because Adrian hadn't even looked at me when he answered. That night, he still came to my room. Still knocked softly. Still smiled when I opened the door. But something felt different now. More fragile. He sat beside me on the floor while I worked on an essay, unusually quiet. You okay? I asked eventually. Yeah. Lie. I closed my laptop. What's wrong? Adrian rubbed his hands together before speaking. You ever worry that if people know you too well, they'll start expecting things from you? I frowned. What kind of things? I don't know. He stared at the carpet. Like answers. Labels. Explanations. The word labels sat heavily between us. Suddenly, I understood this conversation wasn't random. My heartbeat sped up. Carefully, I asked, did the joke earlier bother you? Adrian gave a short laugh. You noticed that? Hard not to. Silence. Then quieter. I just don't like people assuming stuff. The disappointment that hit me was immediate and embarrassing. I hated how fast my mood dropped. Because logically, Adrian hadn't done anything wrong. He didn't know me feelings. Or clarity. Or whatever impossible thing my stupid heart wanted from him. Still, the room felt colder suddenly. Oh, I said. Adrian looked up immediately, like he heard something in my voice I didn't mean to reveal. That's not I didn't mean you specifically. It's fine. Caleb. I stood up too quickly. I'm just tired. That was the first time Adrian left my room early. And the second the door shut behind him, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just attached to him anymore. I was already falling for him. After that conversation, things got weird. Not obviously weird. If someone watched us from the outside, nothing had changed. Adrian still came to my room almost every night. Still stole my snacks. Still sprawled across my bed like he paid rent there. But now I noticed everything. Every pause. Every look. Every time he almost said something before changing direction halfway through the sentence. And worst of all, I noticed myself. How aware I'd become of him. The sound of his laugh in the hallway. The way his voice dropped lower when he got tired. How his hair curled slightly at the ends after he showered. It was bad. Because once you admit feelings to yourself, you can't force them back into hiding. A few nights after the labels conversation, Adrian showed up unusually late. Almost 2 a.m. I was still awake because I'd reached the point in the semester where caffeine replaced actual survival instincts. When I opened the door, Adrian leaned against the frame with his hood up. You look awful, I told him. Thank you. That's the support I need. But he smiled weakly. I stepped aside automatically. What happened? He walked in slowly this time instead of immediately collapsing somewhere. Long night. That explains literally nothing. Adrian rubbed his face with both hands before sitting beside my desk. My roommate's girlfriend came over. Okay. They were fighting. Oh. Loudly. I winced. That's rough. Yeah. He looked up at me finally. Can I stay here a while? The question shouldn't have mattered. But something about him actually asking this time instead of assuming made my chest ache a little. Obviously, he relaxed instantly. For a while neither of us talked. Rain tapped softly against the window while Adrian sat on the floor beside my chair, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. Then suddenly, did I make things weird? I froze. Adrian wasn't looking at me. The other night, he clarified quietly. No. Lie. He gave a soft laugh. You're such a bad liar. I leaned back in my chair slowly. I just didn't know what you wanted me to say. That makes two of us. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Adrian looked exhausted lately. Not physically. Emotionally. Like there was something constantly turning over in his head. I didn't mean to freak out, he said eventually. When my friends joked about us. You didn't freak out. I kinda did. Silence stretched. Then quieter. I just panicked. My stomach twisted. Because there it was again. That feeling that Adrian was trying to tell me something without fully saying it. I chose my next words carefully. You know nobody actually cares, right? I know. Then why panic? He looked up at me finally. And for a second I thought he might answer honestly. Instead, he smiled faintly. You asked too many questions. Occupational hazard. You're a psychology major. Exactly. That earned a real laugh from him. But he still didn't answer. Eventually, I shut my laptop and slid down from the chair to sit on the floor across from him. Close enough that our knees almost touched. Adrian. You can talk to me. His expression changed immediately. That softness again. The one that always ruined me. I know, he said quietly. And then he looked at me in a way that made my pulse go completely unsteady. Not friendly. Not casual. Something else. The air in the room felt heavy suddenly. Neither of us moved. I became hyper-aware of how close he was sitting, how tired his eyes looked, how easy it would be to reach for him. Adrian glanced at my mouth for the briefest second, then immediately looked away. My heart nearly stopped. Did that actually happen? Or had I finally lost my mind completely? Before I could decide, Adrian stood up abruptly. I should sleep. The disappointment that hit me was sharp and immediate. Yeah, I managed. He hesitated near the door. Then, can I ask you something weird? Depends how weird. His fingers tightened slightly around the doorknob. Why do you always let me come here? The question caught me completely off guard. What? Every night, he said softly. You never tell me no. Because I'm in love with you. Instead, I shrugged carefully. I like having you here. Adrian stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, almost to himself. Okay. He left after that. But 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Adrian, you awake? I stared at the message. Me, obviously. 3 dots appeared instantly. Adrian, can I come back? My heartbeat sped up embarrassingly fast. Me, you were just here. Adrian, I know. Another pause. Then, Adrian, I just don't want to be alone right now. That did it. I opened the door before he could even knock. Adrian looked surprised for half a second, then relieved. Real relief. He walked back into my room quietly this time, and before I could overthink it, he sat beside me on the bed instead of across the room. Close. Too close. You okay? I asked softly. He stared down at his hands. I think there's something wrong with me. My chest tightened instantly. What? Why would you say that? He laughed once under his breath, nervous and miserable at the same time. Because I can't stop thinking about things I shouldn't be thinking about. The room went completely still. I knew. I knew what this was suddenly. Or at least I thought I did. But I was terrified to assume. Adrian. He looked up at me then. Eyes uncertain. Open. Scared. And for the first time since I met him, Adrian looked like someone who genuinely had no idea what to do next. I don't think I breathed for a full 5 seconds after Adrian said that. He sat beside me on the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it personally offended him. I think there's something wrong with me. The words replayed in my head over and over. Part of me wanted to ask the question directly. The dangerous one. What things? But I was scared of the answer. Or worse, scared I'd imagined all of this and was about to ruin the best friendship I'd had in years. Adrian, I said carefully, there's nothing wrong with you. He laughed quietly without humor. You don't even know what I mean yet. You're acting like you committed a crime. Feels like it. That hurt more than I expected. I turned toward him fully now. Hey, look at me. He hesitated before finally lifting his eyes. God. He looked terrified. Not dramatic terrified. Not panicked. Just genuinely vulnerable in a way I'd never seen from him before. I don't know what's happening to me lately, he admitted quietly. And I can't shut my brain off anymore. What's your brain saying? He looked away immediately. That's the problem. Silence stretched between us. Outside, someone laughed loudly in the hallway before a door slammed shut somewhere down the corridor. Normal dorm noise. Real life continuing while my entire nervous system melted down inside this room. Finally, Adrian spoke again. You ever get attached to someone too fast? The question nearly knocked the air out of me. Yeah, I said softly. What do you do about it? You tell them. You risk it. You stop pretending. Instead, I said, depends on the person. Adrian nodded slowly like he was filing that answer away somewhere. Then quieter. I think I'm messing everything up. You're not. How would you know? Because if you were, I'd tell you. That finally pulled a small smile from him. There's the therapist voice. I'm not a therapist yet. You basically are. He looked at me for a second too long. You always know what to say. If only he knew. The truth was I had absolutely no idea what to say anymore. Because every instinct in me screamed that Adrian was trying to confess something. But fear kept stopping him halfway. And honestly, same. We sat there in silence again. Not awkward silence. Heavy silence. The kind where both people are thinking too much and pretending they aren't. Then Adrian did something that completely destroyed my ability to function. He leaned sideways until his shoulder rested lightly against mine. Just enough contact to make my entire body tense. Not because I disliked it. Because I liked it too much. I'm tired, he murmured. Then sleep. But he didn't move away. My heartbeat felt ridiculous now. Adrian's head slowly tilted until it rested against my shoulder too, warm and solid and real. Neither of us acknowledged it. I stared straight ahead at my dark laptop screen, trying to act like this was normal. It did not feel normal. After a minute, Adrian spoke quietly without lifting his head. Can I tell you something embarrassing? You've never let embarrassment stop you before. True. I felt him smile faintly against my shoulder. Then, I think about you constantly lately. Every thought in my brain stopped. Completely. The room went silent except for the sound of rain against the window. I was suddenly terrified to move. Terrified to respond wrong. Terrified this moment would disappear if I touched it too quickly. Adrian finally lifted his head enough to look at me. I know that probably sounds weird. No, I said immediately. My voice came out rougher than expected. His eyes searched my face carefully. Then why do you sound nervous? Because I've wanted this for months. I swallowed hard. Because I think about you too. There. The second the words left my mouth, everything changed. Adrian went completely still. Not pulling away. Not shocked. Just still. You do? He asked softly. I nodded once. His expression shifted slowly into something open and disbelieving at the same time. Caleb. I almost laughed from pure nerves. Please don't make me repeat that. That finally got a real smile out of him. Then immediately after smiling, he looked scared again. What does this mean? The honesty of the question hit me straight in the chest. He wasn't playing games. He genuinely didn't know. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I don't think either of us is imagining this anymore. Adrian stared at me quietly. Then he looked down at our hands resting beside each other on the bed. Very slowly, carefully, like he was giving me every chance to stop him, he moved his hand closer until our fingers touched. Just barely. Electric. I looked at him immediately. His breathing had gone uneven. So this is real, he murmured, almost to himself. Yeah. Neither of us pulled away. For a long moment, we just sat there with our hands touching lightly, both acting like the smallest contact in the world wasn't completely altering our lives. Then Adrian whispered something that nearly broke me. I was so scared you wouldn't want this. I turned toward him fully before I could overthink it. Adrian, I said softly, you've been coming to my room every night for 2 months. A startled laugh escaped him. Fair point. And I've been waiting for you every single time. That expression again, that warm, stunned look like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You waited for me? Every night. The vulnerability on his face almost hurt to look at. Then quietly, I think you became my favorite part of the day. That was the moment I knew there was no going back anymore. After that night, Adrian stopped pretending he came to my room just to talk. He still showed up every evening, still knocked softly around midnight. But now there was this awareness between us that made everything feel different, sharper. The first night after our almost confession, I opened the door and immediately forgot how normal human interaction worked. Because Adrian looked nervous. Actually nervous. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said too fast. Then, after a pause, maybe not. That made me smile before I could stop myself. He stared at me for a second and groaned quietly. See, this is your fault. My fault. You keep looking at me like that. Like what? Like you know things. I stepped aside to let him in. You're being dramatic again. I'm coping. But he was smiling now too. The second the door closed behind him, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Not awkward exactly, just intensely aware. Adrian sat on the edge of my bed while I pretended to organize papers I'd already organized twice. You know what's funny? He said eventually. What? I used to think you didn't even like me. I looked up so fast I nearly dropped a notebook. What? You were so quiet when we met. He laughed softly. I genuinely thought you found me annoying. You are annoying. There it is. But I still liked you. The honesty slipped out before I could stop it. Adrian went still for half a second. Then softer. Yeah. I nodded. And suddenly he was looking at me like every answer he'd been searching for was sitting right in front of him. It was unbearable in the best way. I think, he admitted quietly, I started showing up here because you made me feel calmer. My chest tightened instantly. Dorm life's loud all the time. People always around. Everyone performing constantly. He glanced around my room. But here it's quiet. I smiled faintly. You talk nonstop in here. Yeah, but differently. That made sense somehow. Because Adrian with everyone else wasn't the same Adrian I got at 1:30 in the morning. Late night Adrian was softer, more honest, less guarded. Like the darkness let him loosen parts of himself he kept hidden during the day. He looked down at his hands. I don't think I realized how attached I got until people joked about us. My heartbeat picked up immediately. Why? Because I panicked way too hard. He laughed quietly. Normal people don't react like that unless something's already there. Silence settled between us. Then Adrian looked up carefully. Were you disappointed? I knew exactly what he meant. At lunch, when he laughed off the dating joke. And somehow that honesty felt scarier than everything else. A little, I admitted. He nodded slowly like he deserved that answer. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for being confused. That's the thing. He smiled weakly. I don't think I'm confused anymore. Every nerve in my body lit up at once. Adrian looked terrified after saying it. Like now that the truth existed out loud, he couldn't hide from it anymore. What are you feeling then? I asked softly. His eyes met mine immediately. You. God. No one had ever said my name like that before. The room suddenly felt too warm. Adrian stood up abruptly, restless energy taking over him again. I'm trying really hard not to freak out right now. That makes two of us. He laughed under his breath and started pacing slowly beside my desk. I've never done this before. Done what? He stopped moving. Like someone like this. The vulnerability in his voice hit me hard enough that I stood up too. Now we were close again. Too close. Neither of us seemed capable of fixing that. You don't have to figure everything out tonight, I said quietly. I know. Adrian rubbed the back of his neck nervously. I just keep thinking about every night I came in here. Yeah. And how badly I wanted to stay. The confession settled heavily between us. Because the truth was, I'd wanted that too. For months. Adrian looked at me carefully then, like he was trying to gather courage from my face. Can I ask you something? Anything. His voice dropped lower. Have you wanted to kiss me this whole time? My heart almost stopped. There was absolutely no safe answer to that question anymore. So for once, I told the truth immediately. Yes. Adrian inhaled sharply, like hearing it out loud physically affected him. Okay, he whispered. Okay. That means I'm not insane. I laughed nervously. You might still be insane. Probably. But neither of us smiled for long. Because now the space between us felt impossible to ignore. Adrian looked at my mouth again. Not subtle this time. Then back to my eyes. Caleb. Just my name. But it sounded like a question. I stepped closer before fear could stop me. Adrian didn't move away. His breathing went uneven instantly. We can slow down, I murmured. I know. But his expression softened into something painfully honest. I really don't want to. And that was the exact moment he reached for my hand completely on purpose. The second Adrian took my hand, every coherent thought left my body. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just his fingers sliding carefully through mine like he was still half convinced I might pull away. I didn't. We stood there in the middle of my tiny dorm room staring at each other like neither of us knew what happened next. Which, honestly, we didn't. Adrian laughed softly first. We're really doing this. I think so. That's terrifying. You came here willingly. Repeatedly, he corrected. I smiled despite how violently my heart was beating. The nervous energy between us felt almost unbearable now. Months of tension suddenly had somewhere to go, and neither of us knew how to act normal anymore. Adrian looked down at our hands and shook his head slowly. You know what's messed up? What? I genuinely thought you were out of my league. I stared at him. You cannot be serious. I'm completely serious. He looked offended that I doubted him. You're smart. Calm. Everyone likes you. Everyone likes you. Yeah, but in a loud way. His expression softened. You're different. That shouldn't have affected me as much as it did. But Adrian always said things like he meant them completely. No performance. No irony. Just honesty. And somehow honesty sounded more intimate coming from him than flirting ever could. We ended up sitting side by side on my bed again, shoulders touching lightly. Neither of us let go of the other's hand. It felt strangely natural now, like we'd been moving toward this for a long time without realizing it. I feel stupid, Adrian admitted eventually. Why? Because suddenly every single thing makes sense. I smiled faintly. Like what? He looked at me for a second before answering. Like why I kept ending up here every night. The room went quiet again. Adrian leaned back against the wall behind my bed, still holding my hand loosely between us. At first I thought you were just easy to talk to, he said. Then it turned into being the first person I wanted to see every day. My chest tightened painfully. And then, his thumb brushed lightly against my knuckles without thinking. And then I started making excuses to be around you. I laughed softly. You weren't subtle. I thought I was. You showed up at 1 in the morning asking for paper clips once. He groaned immediately. Okay, that was a weak excuse. A little. But you still let me stay. That warmth spread through me again. Because he kept saying it like it mattered to him. Like every open door had meant something. It's kinda embarrassing now, Adrian admitted. Looking back, everybody probably knew before we did. I thought about his friends teasing us at lunch, about the looks we'd occasionally gotten when Adrian automatically sat beside me in every class. Maybe, I admitted. He covered his face briefly with his free hand. That's horrifying. You survived. Barely. I laughed, and Adrian lowered his hand enough to look at me again. Then his expression changed. Softer now. Quieter. God, that look was becoming dangerous. What? I asked carefully. You're really okay with this? The vulnerability behind the question hit me immediately. Not this as in tonight. This as in him. His uncertainty. His inexperience. Whatever complicated feelings he'd been fighting for weeks. I squeezed his hand gently. Adrian, I said softly, I've wanted this for a while. He inhaled sharply again like my honesty kept catching him off guard. You make me nervous, he admitted. You make me lose sleep. That earned a surprised laugh. Seriously? You started appearing in my room every night. Fair. But also, I hesitated. Adrian waited patiently. I didn't know if I was imagining things. His expression fell immediately. You thought I didn't feel this? I hoped you did, I admitted. That's different. For a second, he just stared at me. Then suddenly, Caleb, I need to do something incredibly embarrassing right now. I blinked. That sentence could mean anything. I need reassurance. The honesty nearly destroyed me. What kind? His voice dropped lower. Tell me you want me here. No one had ever asked me for something so simple and somehow so intimate before. And judging by the way Adrian looked at me after saying it, asking had cost him something. So I answered honestly. I always want you here. His eyes closed briefly, like those words physically hit him. When he opened them again, the nervousness was still there, but underneath it was relief. Real relief. You have no idea what that does to me, he murmured. The room felt impossibly small now. Adrian's gaze flicked to my mouth again, lingering this time. Neither of us looked away. Then very quietly, can I kiss you? The fact that he asked so carefully made my chest ache. I nodded once because trusting my voice felt impossible suddenly. Adrian moved closer slowly enough that I could have stopped him at any second. I never wanted to. When he kissed me, it was gentle, careful in the way people are when something matters immediately. And somehow that made it worse. Because the second it happened, months of tension snapped all at once. Adrian pulled back barely an inch, forehead resting lightly against mine. Oh, he whispered. I laughed softly, completely overwhelmed. Yeah, that was definitely not platonic. That broke the tension instantly. I laughed harder, and Adrian smiled against my shoulder, relief pouring out of him all at once. Then quieter. Okay, good, good. I think I've wanted to do that since like week 3. I stared at him. Week 3. You alphabetized your notes in the library, and I got emotionally attached. I groaned immediately while he laughed. But he still didn't let go of my hand. And neither did I. The weirdest part about finally kissing Adrian was that absolutely nothing between us changed afterward. And at the same time, everything changed. The next night, he still knocked on my door around midnight. Still walked in without waiting for a full answer. Still stole my blanket immediately. But now every tiny thing carried weight. Every glance lasted too long. Every touch felt deliberate. Every silence felt charged instead of casual. Adrian sat beside me on the bed while I pretended to read an article for class. Pretended being the important word. You've reread the same paragraph like 6 times, he said. I'm concentrating. You're spiraling. That too. He laughed softly and leaned sideways until his shoulder pressed against mine. Comfortable. Natural. Dangerous. I finally closed the laptop. You're distracting. You like it. Unfortunately, he was right. Adrian looked unfairly relaxed tonight compared to the complete breakdown he'd been having emotionally 2 days earlier. Why are you suddenly calm? I asked suspiciously. He grinned. Because now I know you like me back. You're unbearable. And yet, he nudged my knee lightly with his. You keep letting me stay. That phrase again. It had become something else between us now. Not just about my room. About him. About us choosing each other repeatedly before either of us knew how to say it directly. For a while we just talked quietly like always. Classes. Dorm drama. His roommate accidentally shrinking 3 sweaters in the laundry. Normal things. But underneath every conversation now was the awareness that Adrian's hand kept brushing mine absent-mindedly, like he couldn't stop checking I was still there. At one point he got unusually quiet. What? I asked immediately. He hesitated before answering. I'm kinda scared this is gonna change how people see me. There it was. the fear underneath everything. I shifted toward him slightly. Do you want to hide? No, he said quickly. Then softer. I just don't know how to suddenly become a different person overnight. You don't have to. Adrian stared at me carefully. I still feel like me, he admitted. That's the weird part. Why is that weird? Because I thought this would feel bigger somehow. More dramatic. He laughed quietly. Instead, it just feels right. My chest tightened immediately. He noticed. You're doing this soft expression again. What soft expression? The one that makes me want to say emotional stuff. I smiled despite myself. Sounds difficult for you. You have no idea. Silence settled comfortably around us again. Then Adrian suddenly flopped backward across my bed dramatically. I have another horrifying realization. Oh no. He pointed accusingly at my ceiling. I've basically been dating you for weeks. I burst out laughing. I'm serious. Midnight visits? Emotional conversations? Falling asleep in your room constantly. He turned his head toward me. That's relationship behavior. You literally called them just talking. I was in denial. Clearly. Adrian groaned into my pillow. Everybody definitely knew before us. That part was probably true. Looking back now, it felt painfully obvious. The constant attention. The way Adrian always searched for me in crowded rooms. How instinctively we gravitated toward each other everywhere. We'd been orbiting this for a long time. Adrian rolled onto his side to face me. You know what the worst part is? What? I think I started falling for you before I even realized I could. The honesty of that confession hit me hard enough that I stopped breathing for a second. He noticed immediately. There's the look again. What look? Like you want to climb inside my ribcage and live there. I covered my face, laughing helplessly. You're ridiculous. But am I wrong? Unfortunately, no. Adrian smiled softly at my silence. Then quieter. I mean it, though. The room felt smaller again. He reached for my hand automatically now, fingers intertwining with mine like it had already become instinct. I've never felt this comfortable with someone before, he admitted. I looked at him carefully. Adrian rarely spoke this seriously for long, without joking his way out of it. Which meant every honest thing he said mattered. You make everything quieter, he continued softly. My brain, I mean. That nearly wrecked me completely. Because I knew exactly what he meant. Being around Adrian felt loud in every emotional way. But somehow it also felt like finally exhaling after months of holding my breath. You do that for me too, I admitted. His expression softened immediately. Then slowly, carefully, he moved closer until his forehead rested lightly against mine again. I really like you, Caleb. Simple words. But the way he said them made my chest ache. No hesitation this time. No panic. No confusion. Just truth. I smiled helplessly. Yeah. He laughed softly under his breath. Like an embarrassing amount. That's good, I murmured. Why? Because I'm pretty sure I'm already gone for you. Adrian went completely still. Then, you can't just say things like that casually. I thought honesty was good now. It is, he said immediately. It's just emotionally devastating. I laughed softly, and Adrian looked at me for a long moment like he still couldn't fully believe this was real. Then his expression turned gentler than I'd ever seen it. You know, he murmured, I think this room accidentally became my favorite place on campus. I glanced around my tiny dorm room. Messy desk. Laundry chair. Terrible lighting. Your standards are incredibly low. No, Adrian said quietly. His thumb brushed lightly against my hand again. I just really like where you are. For the next 2 weeks, Adrian barely spent any time in his actual room. Not intentionally. It just happened. He'd come over after classes for a few minutes, then somehow still be there at 2 in the morning stealing fries off my plate while pretending he wasn't tired. At some point, my room stopped feeling like my room. It became ours in this quiet, unofficial way. His hoodie ended up hanging over my desk chair. One of his chargers permanently lived beside my bed. People on our floor stopped asking where Adrian was because apparently the answer was obvious. You know your roommate's looking for you? I asked one evening. Adrian didn't even glance up from where he was lying across my bed. He'll survive. You basically moved in here. MHM. You paying rent? Nope. I tried to sound annoyed. Adrian saw right through it immediately. You like me here. I tolerate you. Sure you do. Then he smiled at me in that soft way that completely destroyed my ability to act normal. The thing was, being with Adrian stopped feeling confusing surprisingly fast. The fear disappeared first. Not all at once, but gradually. Every day, he got a little less nervous touching my hand in public, a little less careful about sitting too close, a little less tense when someone joked about us spending all our time together. One afternoon, we were studying in the library when Adrian absent-mindedly rested his head against my shoulder and stayed there for several seconds, not hiding, not checking who saw, just comfortable. When he realized what he was doing, he looked up quickly. "You okay?" I blinked at him. Why wouldn't I be? His expression softened immediately with relief. "Still getting used to this," he admitted quietly. "Me too. But honestly, I was getting used to it frighteningly fast." One night around 1:30 in the morning, Adrian and I ended up sitting on the dorm roof wrapped in hoodies against the cold. Technically, we weren't supposed to be up there, but Adrian had discovered the access door didn't lock properly and treated rules like gentle suggestions at best. "This is insanely unsafe," I muttered while he sat cross-legged beside me. "Yeah, but look at the view." The campus glowed below us in scattered yellow lights. Everything quiet. Still, Adrian bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "I don't come to your room because I can't sleep." I laughed softly. "I figured that out eventually." "No, seriously." He looked out across campus thoughtfully. "I think it just became the place I wanted to be most." That warmth spread through my chest again. "Dangerous and addictive." "You know," I admitted quietly, "I used to wait for you every night." Adrian turned toward me immediately. "What?" "Before all this." I shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. "Around midnight, I'd start listening for your footsteps in the hallway." The look he gave me after that nearly ruined me completely. "You waited for me?" "Every night." Adrian stared at me for a long moment before covering part of his face with his sleeve. "Oh my God. What?" "That's the most disgustingly romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." I laughed helplessly. "You're dramatic." "No. Caleb, that's insane behavior. You literally showed up every night." "Because I liked you," he argued immediately. Then he froze. We both did. Because that was probably the first time he'd referred to the beginning that plainly. Not confusion. Not attachment. Not uncertainty. Just, "I liked you." Past tense and present tense all at once. Adrian looked suddenly shy after realizing what he said, which was unfair. Confident Adrian was already difficult enough to survive. Shy Adrian was catastrophic. "I mean," he muttered, looking away, "obviously." I smiled so hard it hurt. "Obviously." For a while we just sat there shoulder to shoulder in comfortable silence. Then Adrian spoke again, quieter this time. "I think you changed something in me." I looked at him carefully. "How?" He took a second to answer. "Before you, I spent a lot of time trying not to think too hard about myself." He laughed softly. "Which sounds stupid." "It doesn't. I kept everything shallow on purpose. Easier that way." His eyes found mine again. Then suddenly there was you. The honesty in his voice made my chest ache. "You listened to me differently," he admitted. "You noticed things. Someone had to tell you paper clips weren't a valid midnight emergency." That earned a laugh. But Adrian's expression softened again immediately after. "You made me feel seen," he said quietly. No one had ever looked at me the way Adrian did when he got honest like this. Like every thought in his head was sitting openly on his face. "And that scared you?" I asked softly. "At first? Yeah." He smiled faintly. "Now it just feels like home." Home. The words settled somewhere deep inside me. Adrian glanced toward the dorm building behind us. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "All those nights I kept coming to your room because I said I couldn't sleep?" "Yeah." He smiled slowly. "I think I slept better there than anywhere else." And somehow that simple confession felt more intimate than anything else he could have said.